Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again, and just yesterday we finally got some word out of nowhere, basically, a bit of a surprise, about what Path of Exile plans to do with trade, and basically a manifesto going over their philosophy on trade and what they think about the current system and all of that. So basically they did release their own Path of Exile trade website, which is pathofexile.com/trade. And historically, or the past quite a while now, we have just been using our trade system of PoE.trade. So that's just going to a third-party website altogether, searching for items through their form and getting exactly what you need by then messaging someone, maybe haggling with them, or just trying to pay their price. And it did have its own problems, and certainly it's just a sort of virtual online auction house that doesn't really fully fulfill the role of an auction house, but it is the best thing you can get next to an auction house, and that's currently what we've been using. So they released their own system of pathofexile.com/trade, and it looks pretty damn similar to PoE trade, and that is probably largely because you can't really improve upon what is essentially perfection here for the form and all that. This is pretty clean. It's got everything you need, and for the most part we're very familiar with it because we've been playing around with it a lot. This is still pretty good, I think, and it has everything you need, and it is fairly clean as well. Overall, it's just going to take a bit of getting used to know where everything is and how everything is. And at the end of the day, it should be roughly a similar system, maybe a bit better if they implement certain things. And currently, it just needs a bit of fine-tuning, because as you can see here, when you search for items, it's a pretty big picture, and there's a lot of waste on this, the actual site itself, on the space, and it is a bit unintuitive to navigate when looking at the item to the price. And as well as that, one thing I really don't like is just the transparency of it. It's kind of a bit hard to, dart your eyes directly to a price and see it very obviously. Like, the chaos, for example, over here. When you look over, you can't really see the chaos that quickly or that efficiently compared to the PoE trade system we've been using and are very familiar with. I think there's definitely potential for this to be just fine, just needs a few improvements here or there, and they will probably take the feedback we've thrown at them and make it much better. Now, the big deal about this is it's finally their own website. So that means that they actually control their own trading system and website, and if something goes down in the future, they can immediately get to fixing it rather than wait and just, fingers crossed, hope that the guy that owns PoE Trade is straight on top of that and fixing it. Because without a trade system at the moment, the game becomes, it comes to kind of a standstill for a lot of us. You're progressing along, you really need an item or two, you think, I'll go get it soon. If the trade is down at that time, you're basically boned, because you don't want to play solo self-found because you've played or picked a certain character that definitely needs to trade, because it's just not going to work well enough without the gear required for that character. So without the trade system, it could come to a complete standstill and you can't really play the game, you can't really progress. So it means that they now control their own website, their own trade system, and that's actually kind of a big deal overall. And it means that they do care enough about the trade system to have implemented that. And they say they've been working on it for about a year, and like I said, ultimately it's kind of just a copy of this, but it can't really get much better. It's just a bit prettier here or there, but there is one other big thing that it currently does, and that was announced, and that is you can filter or at least look through people and see if they're AFK or been DND'd by you, or if they're DND'd currently, so that you can avoid them. So that does streamline the process just a little bit. So over here, when you're looking there through your list of items, if this person's AFK, it's already going to tell you they're AFK, and you can avoid whispering them, or you can try anyway, because who knows, they could just be tabbed out for a long time. Likewise, if they're DND at the time, there's no point messaging them because you won't even get a message through to them. So that saves you having to filter through a few extra people when you message them and see what comes through as far as being able to trade with that person or not. So that's something that will happen for the third-party websites as well, and that's just going to streamline the process a little bit. And as well as that, you can now blacklist or ignore people from your listings, and that's pretty good in case you come across someone that you don't ever want to trade with again, or if you think there's someone that's actually price fixing or manipulating the economy, and you just want to filter out those results. You just hit ignore player, and then you won't get the first few listings or all the listings of, let's say, this guy over here. Maybe these are all price fixed, who knows, and they're just trying to lower the price of a certain item, so you don't really want to go through that and just try and avoid all that. But it's basically just to a nice blacklist system, so you don't have to trade with certain abusive and hateful people in the future. So that's their website basically, and it's very similar to PoE Trade, and it's good that it's there now that they own it for themselves. If you're unaware of how Trade currently works, you basically have to just open up a premium stash tab in the most convenient form, that is. You have to buy a premium stash tab, right click it, set it to public, and then you can price everything individually over here like so. Then you can right click any certain item and price it with whatever you like to price it as. Now, the only real problem is not everyone gets a stash tab to start with, and I think in the future I would like to see everyone get at least one premium stash tab so that they can actually engage in trade without having to buy one, because it is a bit of a barrier for entry, I think, and it's certainly a convenience that I think should be open to everyone. So that's the only real problem I see with this current system. Otherwise, I think it's just fine and it is what it is. But they did put out their manifesto as to what trade is like, has been like, and what they would like it to be like. So this is basically Chris himself just talking about trade in Path of Exile and games like this. And I will just throw in my 2 cents about this as well. Basically, I have been around in Path of Exile since pretty much the beginning, and I can remember the archaic and terrible trade system that we've had, and I've played lots of other games like your Diablo 2s, Diablo 1, 2, 3, Torchlights, all that sort of stuff. I've played a lot of those games and I've experienced the trade, and initially in Path of Exile's trade system, it was pretty garbage and it was fairly hard to get through. We didn't really mind though, we were just happy to be playing the game, and it was at its own slow pace at the time, and this was just fine, because as things got faster and faster, you demand more and more convenience and speed from the game, as well as your trade system. Back then, you just have to scour the forums and look for an item that someone was selling. If they had their shop up, you'd scour their shop, you'd look for an item, you'd maybe send them a message and hope they send it, get back to you within the next week or some shit, and then get some trade happening. And it was painful to progress, and items that were actually really good were pretty scarce, as well as no master systems being invented back then, and a lot of other conveniences not quite available yet. So overall, it is in a much better place than it used to be, and we currently have PoE Trade and the actual trade system, as it were, which is, like I said, basically a online auction house, almost as good as it gets to an auction house. Now, the problem with an actual auction house, and the example that we have is Diablo 3, is it does kind of change the game and the way the game has to be played, and the drop rates and all that. So they do go over this in their Consequences of Easy Trade little manifesto here, and it does say largely what I think and feel about the auction house. And that is what happened with Diablo 3. Diablo 3 had a lot of people playing it. We're talking millions upon the get-go, and probably at any one time several 100,000 playing it. And the auction house there, you could search for whatever exact item you wanted, buy it instantly, and it'd come straight to your stash tab. And the real big problem with that is it's too convenient. So it's kind of hard for me to explain because I'm slow, but basically it just becomes too convenient to use the auction house system. So you have to do one of two things. You either let it go, and then you just let it go, and the drop rates are fine, they're normal, and everyone, with the large amount of people there, everyone finds the good shit, they put it on the auction house, and you buy whatever you need if you are missing some of the good stuff, and the market is absolutely flooded with the good stuff, and you just instantly buy it like that and progress along, and don't really have any investment in your character or your gear, and you don't really feel too much affinity for the power upgrade that or the progress that you're making through your game and character. And the way you have to then combat that is by reducing the drop rates drastically, because otherwise the market will be flooded with good items. So you have to reduce the drop rates drastically, and you get what happened in Diablo 3. And that is the most efficient way of playing and upgrading your gear, is to play the auction house game. Because actually playing, getting in there, killing monsters, just was simply way too inefficient for upgrading your character. So all you had to do was then sit there staring at the auction house for hours, waiting for someone to list the perfect thing and snipe it from anyone else that is also looking for that thing. And it just becomes entirely about playing the auction house and far less about playing the game. And that's just kind of an unavoidable fact if you make an instant auction house that conveniences you that drastically. You either have items that are way too flooded in the market and it's way too easy to get, and you have no real affinity for your progression or, power level scaling, or you just plain have to cut the drop rates by a lot, and then you won't ever be finding the item that you want in your solo self-found sort of adventure. You just have to buy it from other people, and it just kind of feels bad not really playing the game for the game. You're playing it just to, kill things a little bit, and then you're done because you've already tested your character, you've had a bit of fun, and that's fine. Now, I think Path of Exile is in a slightly better state with this, though, because even if you did, have all the items you want and could easily have access to all your items, you can still make lots of different characters, try lots of different things, and you would still have some game to play, I think. It's not all about the item hunt in this game, at least not for me. It's largely also about figuring out good combos of characters, skills and gems and all of that, and actually testing stuff and then playing through it, even if you have the ultimate setup of gear, because right now I can already, for the most part, buy all the gear I need. It is just a little bit painful with the PoE trade system. So that is pretty largely why we can't really have a true auction house in Path of Exile, because it does affect the game greatly. And if just one good example I have of something like that is, consider if we did have an auction house and you could buy anything just like that and multiples of it, and it went straight to you. Consider the essence trading, or the essence system. If you could just buy all the essences you wanted at any moment, at any whim, you'd craft some pretty insane gear at this point. If you had a lot of currency, let's just say I have a bunch of exalts, a bunch of chaos right now. If I want to craft a new ring with some contempts, let's just say, I could just go onto the auction house right now and buy 100 contempts in the space of 5 minutes, and then use my 100 contempts. It is far better than crafting with any currency. If you want specifically some good fizz rolls on your steel ring, you'd go to the contempt system and you would create a pretty goddamn good ring very quickly with that, because you have an unlimited supply of contempts at your fingertips. And currently what's preventing you from doing that is, if you go search for contempts on PoE Trade, it's a pretty painful system to go through. You have to individually message each person that has a contempt, go to their hideout, confirm whether or not they're there first of all, barter for the price if you need to, go to their hideout, make the trade, go back to your hideout, and you got one contempt potentially. So you look for people that have multiple to save you a bit of time. But if you want to get 100 of them, it'd probably take you at least an hour worth of trading to get 100 of them. And that makes that's a bit of a deterrent for you just brute force crafting something with your contempt essences. And if you did have the auction house, I think things like the essence system would be far too good, and you'd not have that type of fun stuff in the game really be available in the future to implement, because it'd just be stupid to do so. So for the most part, my feelings on trade in the auction house are outlined in the manifesto here. I agree with just about all of it. I do personally, at times wish I had an auction house. It's far more convenient and it's far nicer, but it does affect the overall economy and game quite drastically, and you've got to be careful what you wish for with that. We have the next best thing, which is basically an auction house, but there's a few intricate steps in the way of having to talk to the person, and occasionally you may get a conversation out of it and maybe some bartering, and it is only as fun as you make it. So if you actually try and get some bartering happening, be a nice person, you may actually get a bit of actual interaction, player interaction, lol, back your way, and it could be a little bit more fun that way. So this did turn into a slightly longer video than I would have liked, and I probably didn't really say anything too revolutionary, so it may have been a bit of a waste of time to watch and listen to this, but there's my opinion, it's out there. If you ever want to know what I think about trade and the new trade system, I think it's all pretty good at this point. I think they step in the right direction to have their own website, and I think PoE Trade, or the actual online auction house / website system, is just fine. I would just really like for people to be able to get a premium stash tab to begin with, so they can begin their trading journey without actually investing anything into the game, as I see that as a barrier for entry. So that's about it from me though. I hope you enjoyed the video and the opinion. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and see you next time.